All right, SuperCoaches, strap in. Welcome to the official AFL SuperCoach podcast, your in and out guide to the greatest game on earth. That's right, AFL SuperCoach. Round 16's in the bag. Round 17's about to be previewed. And how we're going to do that? Well, I'm your host, Jaymz Clements, but joining me, we have, I believe, if I can count this correctly, and judging by my current SuperCoach ranking, I don't count well. Not good with numbers, they say. But we've got four of the greatest SuperCoach minds on this big blue marble we call the planet Earth. We, of course, have the guru, Al Paton. He's right here. What's going on, Al?
G'day, James. Yeah, it was a very interesting weekend. Some interesting scores across the board, which were frustrating at times. But no, I'm excited today because we were talking about gurus. We have the number one SuperCoach in the land who's going to tell us what we're all doing wrong.
That's right. So we've got Patch coming on later. We've got the Phantom coming on later to talk Bubble Boys. But we have the number one ranked SuperCoacher right now. It's our man, the coach of Chev's Titans, Nat. What's going on, Nat?
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me. Pretty stoked at the moment. Team's flying. No problems at all with injuries. So touch wood. Let's hope we stay that way.
I love this. He walked in, he's like, just looked at me, he's like, I'm going to fight you. He's like, just throwing it around. He's like, he's the king of everything right now. Number one, Al. This is awesome. I love this because we had our man Abs Magic on a couple of weeks ago, top 100. You're sort of sitting there floating around the top 100, Patch as well. But we've actually got the best of the best right now.
Oh, 100%. And we teed up this chat when Nat got to number one last week. And then, as I said, it was a pretty tricky weekend, but you managed to navigate your way through it. So still sitting on top, I think, about 40 points clear, number one at the moment. So, I mean, how confident are you that you can stay there? Well, we've got 8 weeks to get to the finish line. And do we start thinking about 50K and how to spend it? Or is it a little bit early for that?
Yeah, I would be lying if I said the thought didn't cross my mind at this stage. But, yeah, it's important not to get ahead of myself. Haven't really won anything yet. So team's flying. Most importantly, it's about sort of team staying healthy, Primo's performing, which, just didn't really happen for everyone this week.
Oh, yeah.
But with that said, yeah, been really lucky. I've made a lot of good moves. It's been backed up with luck, and let's hope it stays that way.
Nice one. All right, well, as per usual, this show is brought to you by SuperCoach Plus. You can follow your live SuperCoach scores as we get to the pointy end of the season on game day. You can see all the break-evens, the projected scores, and away we go. So check the show notes to subscribe. All right, round 16. This was a horror show, Al. Don't know how you fared, but I didn't go great. 21.90 I think I finished on, which was... hey, is that better or worse than my buy scores? I had 4 more players playing and somehow I'm not even topping my buy scores. Why is that, you might ask? Well, it's because my team stinks, first and foremost. But at the same time, all the primos, apart from my beloved Noah Anderson, basically completely underperformed. His full name, of course, Al, he's my hero this week. His full name is Noah Anderson at home. Rips off 140. Love that. And then it was backed up by my beloved Warper, Sam Walsh, with 148 on Sunday, which really saved my bacon, at least got it up to 21.90. My villains, very clearly, everybody else. They all just made the list. It's like, you made the list, Zach Fisher. You made the list, Charlie Curnow. You made the list, Luke Jackson. You made the list, Maximus Gornicus. What are we doing here? Caleb Sarong, 85. Hayden Young, making me look like a fool, Al. You had 62. Ridley, 63. Nick Martin, 75. It is chaos. Chaos with King Deli's tins, I tells you.
James, didn't we have a segment a couple of weeks ago called the No-Go Zone, and you told us all to steer clear of Charlie Curnow?
I just had that little twinkle in my eye and went, wait a minute, he's playing Richmond this week. Check this out. Oh, God, what's he done? Anyway, it was a horror show for me. Just burn this one down to the ground. I think I should have burnt my team down as soon as I traded out Hayden Young the first time. I should have just stopped then. I should have just left and just went, I'll come back to this in like 16 rounds' time. Al, heroes, villains, score.
I scored 22.68, so your score doesn't sound that bad next to that. My worst round for a while, which I've had a pretty lucky run, so it was bound to come crashing down at some point. And like you, a lot of primos underperformed. LDU only 72. Matt Rowell, I mean, I think we might get to him a bit later because there's some issues there. I thought going back to the Conf Ones of People First Stadium would spark him back to action.
That tasty grass.
Yep, well, that didn't happen. Another low score from him. Kerno, obviously, we talked about. So some pretty poor scores across the board. I'll give my hero to Jordan Clark. He wasn't necessarily my highest score, but I was pretty nervous going into the Freo Sydney game on the weekend that James Jordan would tag him, which he did earlier in the year and kept him to about 60 points. But he really fought through it this time and was certainly on that Saturday. He was one of a few players who actually scored over 100. So pretty happy with that from Jordan Clark, and he's been a pretty good trade in for me. The villain, I did have Rowell lined up, but then the captaincy happened. I thought about Zorko, didn't go there. Thought about the Bont. I was scared off by the back worries. So I put the VC on Nick Dacos, and halfway through the last quarter, he was on about 125 points. I think, beautiful, we'll just lock this away. And I'm not really sure what happened. Lost a few points towards the end there, and I thought, look, Zach Merritt is about as safe as you can get as a captain. Never scores under 100. He's playing Geelong, and at halftime he was on about 65 points. Just lock away 130. And then I don't know what happened in the second half. He's had 2 effective disposals, scored 6 SuperCoach points in a half of footy. So absolutely killed me, Zach. Paid a lot of money for him.
You basically did lock in 130. That was great.
Well, yeah, right, exactly. But I thought that would be double to how captaincy normally works. So that really blew a massive hole in my team. So it just goes to show, you can't get greedy with the captain, especially the way the round had been going. I should have just locked in Nick Dacos' score, and that would have given me an extra, 60 points for the round.
Well, the one that I didn't mention was Errol Goulden. I had Zorko at 115 in the VC. Went, nah, watch Errol Goulden rip off 150. That did not happen. So, again, you just made the list. Whoa, Errol. Nat, take us through your team. What did you score this week? Who was your hero? Who was your villain?
Scored 23.83 this week. So I initially thought that was going to be a poor score going into it, but had a chat to some other people. Al mentioned relative score. Pretty happy in the end. So held rank, which is the most important thing, and actually gained a few ranks in front of second place. Hero definitely would be Jai Caldwell from the Bombers. Really happy with him. Great pod option, fantastic role. Really love watching him, so that's fantastic. Let's just hope it holds once Parrish gets back, which I do expect it to. Villain, probably Jack Crisp, who's really been on my hero list last few weeks, but this week really struggled to get involved, chucked a poor score. Only saving grace is in that slot. It was sort of against Houston, who also had a bad game, and I don't have Houston, so sort of made actually some points in that in the end. So all things sort of fell my way, as it has this season. So yeah, very, very lucky again, because I could have easily got burnt on that slot and fallen out of rank 1 very easily.
I absolutely love that Caldwell pick as well. It is so good. The top scoring team of the round, Al, what do we have? 2,732.
Yeah.
We can dream, can't we? We can dream. All right, there we go. Let's do some SuperCoach news, injury suspensions. Al, McGovern with a rib, thumb. Did we get any update after that game?
I didn't see any, so people who have McGovern like me, it's always a nervous watch. He always seems to get injured somehow or another, and then I think it was in the third quarter, it seemed to cop a bad knock to the ribs, and he came back on. Then he went off again later with getting his thumb assessed or something, so we'll just have to wait and see how he pulls up. He generally comes back and plays the next week. He was in hospital earlier in the year and played the next week, so fingers crossed he'll be okay, but we'll wait and see what they say about him. And the other one, you mentioned Zach Fisher, perhaps a little bit harsh to have him as the villain when he got subbed out by Clarko when he was, I think, the 6th ranked player on the ground at that time. And later on, Clarko said, the quote was, he had a knock to the lower leg, which we think is minor. So hopefully that turns out to be accurate, because he's in plenty of our teams, and he's one of the real value of having him there is that he can provide some cover at both ends of the ground. So if he goes down, that's not great.
Yeah, that's creek paddle. For me. Jeez. All right, biggest talking points after round 16 though. Number 1. This is a fascinating one for me, Al, because basically most of my team is weak links. So it's like, who should we replace that are the weak links? I'm like, can I just get another 22 trades? Like, let's just go. Matt Rowell, you mentioned Matt Rowell. 79 this week, 3-round average of 81 is brutal. Jack Steele. Feels like Jack Sinclair has basically just taken all of his scoring and as a defensive mid DPP, which is huge as well, right? Like, Steele, meanwhile, has just completely fallen off a cliff. Chad Chundley Warner, as we lovingly call him on the AFL Today show, 3-round average is 75 as well. Like, that is brutal for a bloke who could be in line to win a Brownlow. And Nick Martin. Now, Nick Martin, could we just track down to when I traded him out and then when I traded him back in, Al? Because I feel like we might find a bit of a correlation here, Nat. I've got a feeling that the exact moment I traded him out, he went bang.
So
when I traded
fault.
him back in, he goes, nope. Pack her up, boys. We're done here. Kiss of death. That's usually reserved for our good friend Tim Mitchell. But geez, this one broke my heart. So, look, the vibe here, should we be trading out weak links if we have trades in the bank? Or do you just sort of prefer basically to have that trade kept aside just in case there are injuries? Like if Zach Fisher goes down, like is out another week, like maybe you want to move on from him. Like, I don't know. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it is really comes down to each individual team and how many trades you've got left. Like you wouldn't consider moving, anyone out of your team if you've only got 2 or 3 trades. But I've got 6, so maybe Rowell. It's really hard to watch the way he's going at the moment. I thought that getting back at home ground would help him. It hasn't. So I mean, if he keeps scoring like that, that's 50 points a week potentially. I'm losing to someone who's got another, a real top scoring midfielder in that spot. So, but then he's dropped down under 500k, so that might take me 2 trades to get him to someone decent. So these are the sort of calculations you've got to make. I mean, Nat, looking at your team, I think Martin is the only one of these guys that's in there. But I mean, how many trades do you think you would have to start thinking about cutting ties with someone? And I mean, is he a player that you're nervous watching each week?
I can definitely say he's nervous, and there are a few of them at the moment now. With this round gone, I'd say you can definitely jump off guys if you've got more than 5 trades. Would be my sort of in general rule of thumb, and it's important to understand what you're trying to achieve as well. So, I could use my team as an example. I've got Nick Martin, who definitely hasn't been in the greatest of form. You could look to get him to a Sinclair if you've got some cash in the bank. That's the big caveat on that, because Sinclair's in such ripping form. Potentially, you could also look to get rid of someone like an Oliver at M8 if you've got him, or a Rowell like yourself, and move him to like a Rosie at that price, because that would be just a straight swap. The benefit would be sort of backing in Rosie to put up those premo scores, which is done in the past and which is shown bits and glimpses around that injury period that he's had, versus someone who's just in a bit of a down slump at the moment. And that's a good way, as you said, to make up 30, 40 points around if you back in the numbers. And I'd say look at the fixture, look at the sort of general trends of that player if they're on the right track. It's a really good move. But yeah, again, it's really trade dependent. So if you've got more than 5, I'd say pull the trigger, because you're not going to win anything really by holding on to some of these players that are just not performing.
Yeah, I feel like someone like Warner is a fascinating case, right? They've got St Kilda this week. And you sort of look at this and go, do they depress SuperCoach scores? He's got a highest score ever against them at 107. And like that's sort of the one you go, oh, this is a tough decision, but do you do it? Like if you're going for overall rank, if you're just having, playing for league wins, maybe you sort of just keep the powder dry then, because he's then got North Melbourne the week after. You're like, come on, man, just make an easy decision here. You're breaking my heart.
I mean, all of these guys, it's potentially risky because we know they're all guys who can score really well and that have at different times this year. I think the other guys are really all sort of out of form. I'm not really sure what's happened to Steele. He's not going as badly as some of these other guys, but he's just sort of more of a 95-point guy now, where he was 120 early in the year. And like you say, maybe it's Sinclair just pinching a lot of his points. But Warner's a slightly different case, because I just think he's just copping the tag nearly every week since he had that super hot patch just before their bye. And then, I mean, the Saints is a team he could score well on, but then Windhager, does he just go straight to him? But then, he could play on Heaney or he could play on Errol. So you never know. And it could always, the week you trade him out is bound to be the one he comes out and scores well. But so, if I was ranking those guys, he'd probably be the one I'd be less inclined to trade. I think, Rowell, I'm definitely looking at moving on this week. And Martin, I'd be definitely thinking about that as well. And it's also, like you say, it comes down to teams and who you have and don't have in your backline. So if there's someone that's really popping off like a Sinclair, if you could afford to get there, that could be a big advantage compared to who other teams have in that spot.
Nice one. All right, well, with this in mind, who are those POD primos? The old Pod Seadley primos. I love this. The trade targets, the ones that you want to get to. Obviously, there's my beloved Isaac Rankine. 7% ownership at the moment. He's awesome. Jai Caldwell, we literally just mentioned him. He's fantastic. He's on Nat's team right now, 505k, 4% owned. Love that. Jack Sinclair, we've hit on him as well, 6% owned. Josh Dunkley. Now, this is a massive. I love Josh Dunkley. The fact that he's just kept scoring at this rate is absolute chaos. Only owned by 7%. My beloved Noah Anderson, 5%. Look, I'm in the top 5% there, Al. Nailed this one. And Connor Rozee, the most handsome man in the AFL, 17%. So, I mean, if we're going to rank these ones out, like, how do we feel about it? Like, are we going for the lowest sort of pod? Are we looking at the ones that we feel like just basically the best about? Like, the Caldwell call is a great one. What led you to that now?
Firstly, it was definitely the role. So that pure inside mid, lots of opportunity to tackle, contested ball, really good SuperCoach scoring avenues. So I definitely look at role still. You don't just pick a guy because he's low ownership. But with that said, anything below like 5% ownership is a starting point for a good pod, I would say, at this time of year. And then try and match that up with a good role. So that was really what led me towards Caldwell. I was definitely surprised by sort of Curnow being the favourite in that discussion because I was definitely having that toss-up. But there's still question marks, a lot of games to play out. So I definitely look at role first and foremost and sort of looking ahead as well, what will the role become, not just what it is. Does a team have some injuries? Do they have, are they in a bit of a form so that they're going to need to try something? That could be, some factors to consider. At the end of the day, though, it's not really all role. It's who you think is going to score the most. So, again, I don't want to get too much into pods myself at this stage. I want to be anti-podding. I want to be covering those common players, whereas someone trying to chase and make up points, that the value of a pod right now is massive, but you do have to jump on the right one. So, because it can burn you in the other way.
I mean, Sinclair's the one on that list that I really love as a player. Another 143 on the weekend. He's just absolutely flying. The role is interesting because it's sort of been since he's settled a bit more in defence. I think he's been going so well, and there's always a chance that Ross Lyon throws him back into the midfield in stints or for a whole game, and it might affect his scoring, and he's priced way above a lot of these other guys. If you had to choose, you've got both Rankin and Caldwell. For a lot of people, I think it might be choosing between those guys. Caldwell's a bit cheaper. Who would you take of those two?
It sort of depends what you need as well. If you need like that 23rd primo, I'd say look at someone like Caldwell with the DPP. So you can sort of move him around your lines. And at the same time, Rankin is quite expensive, so you might not have an option. If you do have an option, I'd probably say Rankin just because of his job security. I don't see him moving out of that mid-forward role that he's got, which is really nice, especially with Crouch being out. But it might be looking at which one you can afford. Look at fixture as well. I haven't had a proper look between those two. But if you are weighing that up, look at fixture. I think Adelaide's run isn't the easiest coming home. Whereas Essendon still have a couple of decent matchups to go and a good Marvel run as well, or MCG Marvel. I'd personally take Rankin, though, if I had to decide between those two guys.
Just on purely who'll score the most points?
Yeah, just his ceiling. And I think Caldwell, while he's had a couple of nice games, they have been against very easy opposition in Geelong and West Coast. It's, not going to have that type of luxury every single week, whereas Rankin, you sort of just back him in at the moment with his elite form. I'm not exactly sure what his ratings is just from a statistical standpoint, but I know it's very high in that forward line. SuperCoach points aside, just general football position. Yeah. So.
That's awesome. Did we see enough from Rozee this week to sort of go, it's okay to bring him in at 435?
Geez, at half-time, I thought this is a massive miss. He was on about 75 points or something, and I thought I'm really going to pay for not getting him last week. And he slowed down a little bit, still scored 103. I mean, 435 is still a great price. I suppose the issue for me last week was I don't really have a midfield slot for him. This week, potentially, I could kick out Rowell and chuck him in there. Would you rather have him as an M8 or potentially on the bench as an extra primo if you could afford to do that?
Yeah, ideally you'd want him as a sort of looping option with your weaker M8. So if you can, obviously you're going to have more money and more trades to do that, whereas it's just Rowell to Rozee in one. But yeah, sort of as I was saying earlier, I'd be more than happy personally if I was going Oliver to Rozee or Rowell to Rozee, just to name a couple, where you just trade off and sort of back in Rozee to outperform Rowell on the run home. Again, risky play because they're both types of players of similar scoring the same sort of stuff. So it could be a bit of a sideways move, which doesn't really net you anything and loses you a trade. But at the same time, you do have that chance of 30, 40 points per week if Rozee puts in some of those ceiling games in a row. Port find a bit of form coming home, pushing for finals top 8. And Rozie's just a gun of a player. I really like watching him. I also said to one of my friends is Butters might be copying that attention. So that could open up Rozee and some even higher ceiling type of scores. So
yeah, I like that about Caldwell too. He's never going to get tagged.
Exactly right.
Merritt always gets it. Just I think we'll get Patch on in a second to drill a bit deeper into your team and how you've gone so far this year. But how important is it in terms of setting up the side to have loops and extra? How I see how you've got an extra premo in defence basically. I've sort of got Sexton still on the bench who I can swing around between a few lines, but debating whether I could basically trade him to a Rosie, for example.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a tricky calculation to get it right. But when you're going down low on trades, and how do you manage those loops every week? Because it's easy to get it wrong as well.
It is. Well, I got it wrong this week myself. So it's the danger with the loop in a sense you actually can lose points. I know Jackson Kerno loop as well would have lost points. So there's quite a few of them floating around this week. But I think the most important thing of that extra premo is not so much the looping ability. It's always nice to have a look at a guy in advance, then back it up or take his score. The best reason why I'd be bringing in a 23rd is just to cover those 1 week injuries, suspensions, random things laid out. It's like a TDK. If that happens in your mids, you've just got the E slapped on a Rosie or whatever, you're not going to lose 80, 90 points, which is massive in the context of the season, which is really so close because of the bye rounds at the moment. There's extra ones from the opening rounds really made the competition even closer than in previous years, it feels like to me. So really looking for just cover rather than looping. Looping's a sort of an added bonus.
It's a good call. I mean, for, context sake, you are 35 points ahead of two.
Yes.
So it's literally quite a decision like that can like make or break that 1-2 switcheroo. So I'm just saying, I'm not putting the mocker on anybody, but wow. All right, that's good stuff. Let's bring on Patch now to have a chat with Nat. Finally, we've got Patch in. Patch.
Hello.
When you look at Nat's team,
envy.
Do you just
Jealousy.
get the sheer jealousy that I have? We're like, you've just made all the good decisions. You're good at this. Me, I'm just like, basically, how can I screw up my team the most? Like, that's my entire approach this year.
You know the scene in The Simpsons where Homer's making the barbecue in the backyard and he's holding up the
grill? What the hell is the grill?
Yeah,
why doesn't mine look like that?
Why doesn't mine look like that is basically my thought reaction looking at your side.
Fair enough.
And at your rank. But yeah, how have you found it so far this year? Are you getting nosebleeds up the top? Are you starting to think about what you'd spend 50K on?
I have been, but again, as I said earlier, it's not about the money so much. It's not really why I play SuperCoach either. It's just I love football, and SuperCoach adds that extra little bit of interest to the game, and it's gives me a reason to watch just a random GWS Adelaide game on a Sunday afternoon, whereas rather than just watching my Bombers games, for instance. So with that said, though, once you're in the pointy end of the season, you're a chance to win it. Definitely things start to feel a little bit more stressful and intense. If I'm still there at the end of the year, who knows?
So tell me about yourself. How long have you been playing SuperCoach for? Have you been up towards the pointy end in seasons gone by, or is this your first time flying at the really top 100, top 50, top 1 point of the rankings? Like, how's that journey gone for you?
I can confirm this is my first time being rank 1. That would be pretty good to back it up. But I have had a round rank of 7, which is sort of what got me into the SuperCoach mode and really got me into the game. It was just a random sort of great round. It's like, what if I did this, for the overall rank? So the season following that, really sort of stuck into it, did a lot of research with rookies, who I might think is going to score the best. But this is my 3rd year playing, so pretty fresh, I guess, compared to some others. And haven't really been at all competitive. I think my first round I had like half the Bombers team in my SuperCoach team, just a bit of fun, all sorts of players, and watched them play. But it's the 2nd year sort of took it a bit more seriously, but again, still just watching guys like yourself, YouTubers, people on social media, what their teams look like, sort of copying them a little bit too much. Not really knowing what this rookie even looks like, for example, just put him in my team. But this year, really, just trusted my gut from the start and pre-season research, all that good stuff, and really got stuck into it. Sort of just went from there. A big thing really is not worrying about what other people have been doing this season. Has been something has, I think, separated me a little bit. Whereas just copying people. Last year, I sort of was the other way. I was too much worried about, what's everyone else doing? I need to get on this guy or whatever. But with that said, I have been watching guys and seeing what the general community is doing.
Yeah.
And so it's not disregarding their position and their advice, but just sort of trusting my gut, which has been, sometimes easy to say, harder to do, I think, in this game.
So what's your week look like then? So you're obviously watching and listening to a fair few, podcasts and videos and all of that. Are you watching, one or two of them a week, like 3 or 4? What's the load like? Then listening to them on the train and having a look at your trades on a Wednesday night? Are you tinkering with it all week, or you like wait till teams come out and then you start looking at it? Like, what's the process for someone that's good at the game and doesn't involve, just having their job involve SuperCoach Be Open?
Yep. It's bit of everything really. So that early, what are my initial thoughts on the round so far? Sunday night rage trades or whatever, get guys in and out quickly. But at the end of the day, you sort of have to wait until teams come out to really finalise your moves. So I always do like to sort of make a blueprint in the start of the week. This is what I want to do. Target some guys or sort of flag a couple of guys in a particular position that I might want to bring in for the following week. And then sort of have that as the teams being subject to change. But I do like to think about maybe even a week in advance as well. Who am I going to bring in the following week? Trying to make sure I've got enough cash to do that if everything goes well. You can't really plan too much. All sorts of things can happen. But I do like to plan in advance for that the week coming, but also have a sort of a bigger picture in mind for the following weeks as well.
Yeah, okay. Talking about your starting team, how did that come together? Who were you happy with? How did it go to start the season? Tell me about that.
Yeah, starting team has been a bit of a mixed bag really. Started a lot of mid prices, so like guys like Crouch, Steele, Wines, Nick Martin in the midfield as well, 490. So sort of high value mid prices, but not the uber midfield setup. But with that said, the following week I sort of made a big structural change. I dropped one of those guys down to McKercher, who I didn't start, and then got in guys like Sarong and Ryan before prices had moved, with the idea that I really wanted ceiling scores for the early buy rounds, whereas like you're going to lose 4 scores anyway. If you get some dodgy guys or rookies that don't score well, you're not going to sort of bleed points on that because of that extra cover. So that was the sort of structural change that I made very quickly. And that's worked out really nicely because both those Freo guys have been massive to start the season.
Yep.
And also just sort of fielding the correct rookies. So not losing points on rookies and having good scores on the bench and bad scores on the field has really been the opposite for me. I've always gained points by fielding the right rookies, which has been really lucky. But also looking into some narratives. So guys like Harley Reid, I got his bounce back game against Sydney, for example, when he went really nicely at that gather round, I think it was. Whereas a lot of guys were sort of benching him because he'd put in some poor form. Guys like Fielding getting Sam Darcy's 113 when it was sort of like that bounce back game. I can't remember exactly when it was, but just getting on the right end of those sort of things. Yeah. But just to respond to your earlier question as well about how many podcasts and people I listen to, I try to listen to like literally all SuperCoach content. So
oh my goodness.
Maybe 10 or everyone. I'll shout out a couple like SuperCoach with DR, George, Fantasy Take TV podcasts, all that sort of stuff. Jeez. SuperCoach Insider, you guys, of course, every week, dedicated listener. But yeah, just on the train or on the way back from uni, whatever, just listening to guys, getting informed people, experts' opinions and informed decisions, but not sort of letting that dictate what I do, just being a contributing factor. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice one. Did you have any landmines that you avoided? Because like obviously I bounced from one landmine to the next, like just hopping. It's like, oh, that looks like a landmine, better jump on it, bang. Like, did you have ones that you're like, oh, I'm glad I didn't make that trade, or like were there dudes that you got off at the exact right time? Like, what do you reckon?
Yeah, most definitely. The biggest one was Tom Green. So I didn't start Tom Green, which at the start of the season was giving me some nervous sweats when he was ever he was playing, because he was just going to pop out a 150. It felt like every week, especially when it get like 650k. So I almost brought him in at that stage. I was like resisted that urge. I thought, he's got another buy round 12, so he's got that first buy. Decided to back in and just say, I'm not going to pay that much money for that guy who I sort of knew was a little bit of a risky choice with his disposal efficiency and bit of that clanger proneness, I guess, if you will.
Yep.
And so I backed it in. Obviously, no one could see that 5 coming, which was the injury one, but that was the big landmine that I dodged, and that round really shot me up the ranks to, I think, top 10 it was actually that round. I think I was sitting at about 100, and then that really catapulted me. So that was the biggest landmine by far. Yep.
Yeah. How did you go about upgrading? You mentioned you looked at bringing in Tom Green at 650K, and we found so often this season bringing in the really expensive guys that people have coughed up for Sarong, for Rowell, people coughed up for Green, and then got slapped with a 5 straight away.
Yep.
Have you tried to avoid the really expensive guys and go for the more value options?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's hard to do because they're in such good form. You want these guys in your team. But even this week sort of shows that like guys like LDU and Goulden, you know, they put in some really nice scores, but then they can just put in a stinker and their cash is going to come down. You know, if that had happened earlier with them, you'd be jumping on them. But now it's sort of too late. But yeah, most definitely resisted the urge to get the guys like Rowell, Merritt, Tom Green, I think were the big ones really that I didn't have, but could have easily jumped on, and a lot of people were jumping on. Maybe could also add Tim English to that list as well. And that's been really good that I didn't jump on them because I've saved money by not getting them, and I haven't really been punished because they haven't kept up that form line. Instead, targeted guys with value. So got Whitfield nice and early for sort of 500K. Did his job, and he's done his job really nicely. He sort of kept a rookie off field at that D5 position. Guys like Oliver, I sort of took the punt on. Didn't really work out, but it got some decent scores from him, and again kept rookies off field, and then moved him to Goulden. So, you know, it sort of was a bit of a stepping stone with a bit of upside. So definitely target value. I've also got Stewart in my team, who I brought in a couple of weeks ago now. I think it was 4 weeks ago. Hasn't been fantastic, but I still back in guys like Stewart, who have that fallen primo, who has the proven history. And, you know, I think he'll come good still. So it's probably like a downgrade target for people at a budget D6. I'd be sort of not advocating getting him in because he hasn't been a great watch and he's copped so much attention. Seems like every week he's getting a tag. But definitely chasing value basically wherever I can rather than paying up for guys that are 650 or so.
And likewise with cash generation throughout the year as well, you've saved money there. How focused were you on getting rookies in and making sure you had that right flow of cash before you then would jump on, say, a mid-pricer or an expensive guy?
About as good as I could be, I guess. It felt like it was just a revolving door at D7, really, with those rookies. It's absolute carnage. Like, I had Gibkiss, Reed, got Gibkiss out to Hoare, who also went down. Couldn't catch a break. Got Hoare out eventually, and so I did fix up that Deadwood on the bench, but I still got Zach Reed, for instance, so I haven't been able to fix all the issues. The good thing is that it's been confined to the bench, so I haven't had those scores on field and I haven't copped negative or those sort of really poor scores when they've gone down. But with that said, I have done my best to sort of try and keep cash generation going. Hasn't always worked out, but I have managed it enough to get full primo and a 23rd. So it's worked out quite nicely, but I am running low on trades.
Yeah. How am I allowed to ask how many you've got left?
Pretty sensitive topic, but I will
if you just blink a certain number of times.
Yes. I'm down to 2 currently with the 23rd, so not a lot of room to move. But
how are we feeling about having 2 left?
Well, I was saying to Al earlier, it felt like my season was actually over on the weekend when Fisher got subbed to questions of injury and Grundy was getting his shoulder assessed after he went down. So I was like, oh, there's my 2 injury trades. I guess it's season over. Turns out they came good on the injury front anyway. And so really this stage, season-ending injuries, if it's sort of one of those super expensive guys, I'll look to move out. But if it's someone that's underperforming, I'll just hold them and I've got covering Crisp or something like that, I'll use him. And if it's a 1 to 2 week, I'll also look to just hold and maybe field like a rookie, like a Dowling or a Kruger at R3 if he's still around.
Sorry.
No, that's it. I just want to know if you've got one favourite move that you made this year that you're just like, yes, nail that guy. Because obviously for me, I'm looking at your thing and going, damn it, I wish I had Caldwell.
That's been a big one, but I'd probably say, and because there hasn't really been enough time to assess that pick, I guess, I'll say Matt Crouch from Adelaide as a starting selection. Really been nice. So it was really Crouch versus Tom Green for a lot of the comp there in that sort of slot, and Crouch has been fantastic. He had a little bit of a form slump and a suspension where a lot of guys moved off him. I did stick fat with him and held him through, and then he really backed it up just before he got his season-ending injury, where he's pumping out primo numbers, and I was really happy to hold him. Actually, it's sort of M7, M6. Yeah, so that would probably be the one where it's like that's what's shot me up. And even though he got injured, he still unlocked a buy-free player who I could jump onto and just really good on-field scores. So, yeah, I'd say Matt Crouch is the one for me.
Nice.
Yes. Lovely. And then the only other thing, or the last one I had was, has being in the top 10, the really, really pointy end, kind of changed how you've approached both your trades and your loopholes and the whole kind of strategy? How has it changed that? When did you kind of make that click as, I can really kind of push here? And what are some of those changes that you've made? Like I saw you loopholed Luke Ryan on the weekend. Yes. That's, not something most people would be considering doing. Like that feels like a very smart play, or potentially very dumb play. I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe smart in theory, dumb in practice perhaps. Didn't work out this week. I just thought, maybe Ryan's role has changed a little bit with that stat padding issue, let's say. And because he's so highly owned in the top 1%, I thought, if he goes poorly, it's actually a good thing for me, which is weird when you own a guy, but you are sort of actually anti-podding your own players sometimes with captaincies and things like that. Decided to loophole him. He actually went really well, and then I got Crisp's poor score on field. So what I should have done in hindsight was loop the pod option that I have in my team, which was Crisp. He played earlier. Should have looked at his score and then fielded Stewart, who is also relatively pod in the top 1%, and then got maybe a few extra points from that. But the general idea was to get the high pod or the high ownership in Ryan and cover against a poor score, and then maybe make up some points that way. Didn't work out this week, but that was the general thought behind it.
Yeah.
I love that. An anti-pod.
Anti-pod.
Watch out. My entire team is anti-pods at this point. Yeah. That's great. All right. It's been a good chat with Nat with Patch. I enjoyed that. Now, let's keep Nat around. We'll keep Patch around as well, but we're going to go have a chat with the Phantom right now. All right, here we go. From parts unknown once more. He's backed in his man, Matty Nix, and has paid off in spades. It's the Phantom. What's going on out there, Phantom, in the wide, wild west?
My man, Matty Nix, a big call, James, but he has backed in Billy Dowling, and Billy, who actually is our man, on the lair, delivered on the weekend. He's held his spot. Some good signs, but, the big question is, do we need these kids in SuperCoach this week?
That is it, right? So we've actually got a couple on the bubble. So Ari Showenmaker, Logan Evans, 117 for Showenmaker. Obviously, he's got that booming leg of his. Logan Evans as well, break even of minus 61. But then the key aspect, I think, here is that what we might be looking at for some of these bubble boys, Patch, is like the sort of switchability of someone like Lawson Humphreys, who is the most traded in player so far at 117. The key being defensive mid. Defensive mid,
scored a lot of points, but only played one game.
Yep.
Phantom, where were all these guys like 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago? You've been hiding them from us. You've just been hoarding defense rookies, and suddenly you're like, you don't have trades now. I'll throw them like crumbs to like a pack of pigeons.
I wish I could, because I would do that to you, but I'm having the same issues. I needed these guys. You talk about Evans, Showenmaker. I'd love to get one in defence this week. Doesn't suit the structure. And as we spoke about last week, what's your strategy behind trading in these guys? It's all about, maximising that cover, and we want quality. We don't need quantity on the bench in the run home. So I didn't mind Logan Evans. I know Port like Logan Evans, kicked a goal on the weekend against the Saints. Pretty ugly game at Marvel Stadium. Another 11 touches for him, but you'd think Ken keeps him in the side, and he could provide reasonable cover in the run home. But again, you wouldn't really want to be relying on these types of names in the final 8 rounds.
Yeah, so what are you looking for? You're looking for essentially it does feel like Showenmaker, if he stays in the team, has like a base level of scoring. Like Logan Evans, do you think he can sort of match that as well, or Lawson Humphreys? What do you think? What are you looking for? You're looking for that base level?
I think so. Someone that's going to stay there for most of the next 8 weeks as well. But again, I think it all comes down to what you can do with the money. If you need the extra money to go down to that 102K price to make that trade, then do it. Even if you think Showenmaker's going to outscore Evans in the run home from here, which he might, if it doesn't allow you to go to that trade, then you definitely go prioritise that top end of your team, as we've said all along. So I went Saad El Hawley from the Bombers. We know he's not playing at the moment. brought him in last week, defender midfielder. I sort of valued that swing, even though he's not playing, over another playing rookie, because it means I can move around the different types. The top, I've got Will Dawson as well. Zach Fisher can swing around. So I've opened up the swings. I've prioritised that over, a 40 or 50 from a rookie.
What about Jacob Blight as well? Did you like what you saw out of him?
I did. Well, we spoke about him. Wish this was a month ago. We were hoping for it a month ago on the show. Big numbers over in the waffle. Big numbers in his VFL debut coming in. Took a bit longer. Adamuze made us wait. Did like what I saw. Obviously, we can't expect him to come and put up those big numbers and those three-figure scores at the top level. But again, too many guys now popping up at the wrong time. And, do we need him now? That's the big question. Could you trust him over guys who've seen longer at this point? Maybe not.
Nice one. Patch, have you got any vibes on this from what Phantom's sort of breaking down? Like, do you have anyone you prefer?
I bought in Sean Maker expecting Yo to be laid out on the weekend. So I, realised at the point I couldn't swing Fisher back at that point in time and just wanted to make sure I had some defensive cover in case something went really bad. Didn't. Kind of wish I'd held the trade now. But I'm now at the stage of the year, and Nat, you might be in the same, where anyone debuting is bad because it means we can't pick him next year at a basement rookie price. And that's the stage I'm at. I'm like, stop playing the kids. I know some clubs now need to start playing the kids, but stop it. Our imaginary football teams need them to be cheap next year.
Right.
And that is more important than any development they could possibly get at the top level in the back half of the season.
And how about you, Nat? Do you prefer like the idea of like someone like Lawson Humphreys with the defensive mid DPP swing ability than over somebody like Logan Evans, even though he might be bargain basement at 102, is still only in defence?
Yeah, a little bit team specific, of course. If you need that loop to unlock some moves and cover, I'd definitely say and agree with what Phantom said is make sure you've got the swings if you've got players who have DPP and who can cover. So I definitely prioritise making sure you've got access to all lines if you can. So bringing in a non-playing player is fine, I would say, at this stage of the season. As long as you've got some cover there, it's a little bit tricky if all your rookies are dead and you bring in another dead rookie just to unlock a bit of a swing. That's where you might want to have a bit of a thought. The only other thing is, it's not so much about how much money they're going to make. I'd be valuing job security above all else, because all you need is just one round. If the rookie's not playing, then you're going to lose points. So anything helps at that stage. Not so much about their ceiling, for instance.
Yeah. Phantom Zach Taylor debuted on the weekend, which was a bit sneaky. What were your thoughts on how he played?
Well, I think I'm with you. We've blasted Matty Nix on the show about play the kids. Of course, we don't need him to do it anymore. What does he do? Ruin Zach Taylor for 2025. As you mentioned there, Patch, one of the best things I think you've said all year.
The bar is
of our
6 feet underground.
Footy team. He started as a sub, which was disappointing. Had some good numbers in the SANFL over the past couple of years, taking his time to really to break in. It's hard to judge given the limited game time, but he did show what he can do. Nice kick inside 50 to the leading forward. He is a good ball user. That's why I think he can be a good SuperCoach scorer down the track if he can get some consistency, in form and in his body as well. He's had some issues with injury so far in his short career, but didn't mind what I saw. Hopefully, maybe Nixie just tucks him away for next year now.
And of course, the big one, Kynan Brown played. Speaking of debuting as the sub and then being dropped and then coming back in as a laid in as the sub. If you need that 1 or 2, like mid, he's basically the only forward we've got on offer. Would you consider bringing Kynan Brown in? Is he going to get a full game ever under Simon Goodwin? What's the situation there?
It's a good question. Poor fella. It's hard to see him playing this week. Surely he's back in the VFL, getting a full run. Can't have 3 weeks of playing that because then when he does return to the extended workload, he'll struggle a bit, you would have thought. So I reckon VFL will stay away from him. And he's Wakefield Andy, debuted up at the Gabba on the weekend. It was clean, tough as well. It put up some big numbers in the VFL throughout the year. 117k forward. The only option doesn't have that DPP swing. I've played around with trading him in this week, given I probably need a forward in my pursuit to get Isaac Rankin in. But again, no DPP swing hurts me going forward. Is it going to hurt me, if he doesn't stay in the side or I need to swing? So you'd need to be a really good player to overlook that DPP swing, and I'm not sure anyone is at the moment.
So I guess with all this in mind, with the sort of just the simple idea of like, all right, I maybe just need some points out of the rookies I'm going to bring in this week. Do we feel like, if you want to rank them out here for us, Phantom, Showmaker, Evans, Humphreys, like, do you feel like those are the top three that might actually have points if they all play this week?
Yeah, it's a hard list. It's not what. Yeah, I think so. I think Showmaker and Evans are probably both pretty on par. Showmaker, we think maybe scoring potential is a bit better, but Evans is 102k, and maybe his job security is a little bit better given Port's issues throughout the year. Ken likes him, has brought him in. Showmaker, we like what he does in an attacking sense, but they brought all those guys back as well. Webster, Isaiah Wanganeen, Miller came back in on the weekend, played against Brisbane. They didn't play in that previous week. It's not against Brisbane, sorry, that was the week before, when Showmaker made his debut and scored okay. So I probably have Evans just above at number one. Lawson was good for the Cats. But again, you'd want to see one more on debut, but Evans just in front of Showmaker, I think, because of price and maybe the fact that he probably plays the rest of the year for Port.
Nice one. Nat, Patch, any other questions for Phantom before we let him go?
Well, at this stage, I don't think for me, since I'm not making any moves.
Nice. Very nice. All right, well, there you go, Phantom. Full of words of wisdom as always. Thanks for jumping on.
Pleasure. The number one ranked SuperCoach in the world doesn't need to ask questions of me. Doing a great job, so I might hit him up after the show.
I should have reversed it, to be honest. Like, Phantom, do you have any questions for someone who's actually good? Here we go.
It's good to see you've brought some credibility to the show as well, boys.
That's very kind.
All right, there you go. That's the Phantom. Now it's time for the quickfire round. We've still got Nat. We've got Patch. Let's start right here. Is the great tagger panic of 2024 over? Question mark. Interesting setup.
I wish. I wish, James, but...
Because if you look at some of the matchups, it's... Maybe last week was a little bit like on the down low, okay, even though some of the, the actual scores are pretty chaos. But if you look at it, how do we feel about this tagger panic? What do we reckon, Patch?
I mean, it's just something we've got to factor in each week. It's just like, your matchups have like another layer to it where, you've got teams that concede, lots of points to defenders. You look like St Kilda. So you've then got to, weigh up the, is Dan Houston going to go off the chain or is he going to get some attention?
Yeah.
Or I don't know, it's just another thing yet another thing for our brains to spend precious energy on.
Because I think, what was it, Windhager versus Butters this week? Butters was still fine. Jordan versus Clark. Clark was still fine. Bedford, Rankin was obviously no hassles there. Jordan, Dawson, prior to that. Dawson just in general, I think, is still just doing these ones. But
he's doing those ones in games,
Exactly.
which is the very up and down roller coaster.
Did you have any qualms with that going into, probably the last month or so now?
Yeah, definitely something to keep on the radar, especially with guys seeming to pop out of nowhere, like Bedford, for example. I think you've just got to be mindful of what could happen. It's not so much that it will. So it's a good point you make. Just because your player's got a high likelihood of getting tagged doesn't mean he's necessarily going to go poorly. So you don't necessarily want to bench him if you've got a 23rd, for instance, but it's something you want to think about. Sort of loophole maybe where you can with something like that. But, as you say, guys can still score well with a tag. I know some of my players have done it. Whitfield, for example, got a Jordan tag, still got a 105. Really happy with that. Jordan Clark got a bit of a James Jordan tag. Whitfield got a Jordan tag. Clark got a Jordan tag. And they both sort of put out decent scores. So it's not to say that it's going to ruin the round, especially if your guy is efficient with the ball. And even for some of those inside guys, it can actually be a bit of a boon because they're always around to tackle, and that can mean contested possessions go through the roof, for example. So it's not all bad. Yeah.
Nice.
But it's then obviously something, if we'd known maybe 6 weeks ago when we're still doing trades, we could have then, chosen a few different players. But you've then looked at like a Caldwell we've spoken about, How much of that was the fact that he's not going to cop that attention?
Yeah, a big part because and it's like that idea of what I was saying with Rosie is that can open up scoring avenues for him because there's no threat of a tag and someone has to get the points in and around the ball. So look for that, and it can also mean if someone is going to get tagged, who does that open up? What other options does that give you?
Jason Horn-Francis. Hey, still my pod. Yeah. I love him. He's been in the team from day one. I love that.
Nice.
Here's another man who's been in my team from day one and a lot of other teams as well. Sam Flanders. Stupid, sexy Flanders.
Nothing at all.
Will he go a full season without scoring under the ton? What do you reckon, Patch?
Sure. I mean, he's done it so far. Exactly. No reason he can't continue doing it.
So, what are we? 16 rounds through. He has North, Port, GWS, the Lions, the Eagles, Essendon, Melbourne, Richmond. I think he's a fairly good shake there to actually do it.
Fair shake of the sauce bottle.
Oh, don't mind this. Nat, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I'd back him in. I'd also think, it's someone we should probably or at least I have disrespected a little bit with the captaincy option. It's been ultra consistent and it's really what you want from a captain. Someone who's just going to pop out a 115 plus as a floor and someone you can bank on that Sunday or Saturday night when you need that. And I personally haven't gone near him enough for the captaincy. And so someone on the run home maybe just to think, well, if I need a safe captaincy, back in Flanders because I'd say 100 and it doesn't really matter where he plays either by the look of it. Yeah. He's just really a really good player.
Yeah, I always have the thought of, I should make Flanders captain, but I'm making that thought like halfway through the second quarter when he's on 65 and it's like,
yep.
I should have done that.
He's on track for 400 this week. So.
He's got 7 scores above 119. It's ridiculous. I love him.
That's good.
Fantastic.
When will Kynan Brown be subbed on this week?
Who knows? Who knows? He got dropped initially. He played 5 minutes and then got, did a game saving tackle, then got dropped and then got brought back in as a late in and was the sub again. And he's played 25 minutes in 2 games. Why, Simon?
Why is the question, I think. So he has a total of 36 SuperCoach points across those 2 games as well. So I'm no math magician, but an average of 18, not bad. Also worrisome. I don't know. What do you reckon? Does he actually see the park this week?
You'd hope so.
You'd hope so.
But I don't know. Melbourne putting up a decent fight maybe, makes them think that there's still some gas in the tank and that they should keep. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm stalling for time here.
I love it. All right. How few trades? I'll say the word properly. Is too few with 8 rounds left in the season. I've got 5, I think. And I feel okay with that. Patch?
I have 3 and I don't.
Cool.
Not a fan.
I have 2 and I don't. So I'd say anything above 4 is probably ideal.
Yep.
It also depends if you've got a cover as well. So keep that in mind. And if you need to make a bit of a pod play, I don't hate going down to 2 or 3 trades. If you want to take a bit of a risk, go for someone you're going to enjoy watching on the run home and who's going to give you a bit of a point of difference. As long as you've got cover, I'd say. Yep.
Yeah, like the fact that I've got that 23rd guy on the bench, albeit Charlie Curnow, who I'm not very happy with at the moment, it does, make me feel a little bit better about.
I also, I tried to tell you.
You did.
In my no-go zone.
You did.
I went there as well, but I'm an idiot. Don't listen to me. What are we doing here? All right,
it was Richmond. It was...
it was so set up perfectly.
Set.
Instead, Lockie Fogarty kicks all the goals.
Orazio, he made the best passer on Saturday night and it just fueled him.
All right, before we kick you out, Patch, who are you going to captain, do you think, this week?
Well, look, I've not captained Marcus Bontempelli for the last 2 weeks and that's made me look like a goddamn fool. And, if he's approaching any sort of injury cloud, then I'm just going to slap that C on as fast as I goddamn can.
I reckon you'll be outside the kennel just with a tire iron, just whang in the back of the leg. All right, there's going to be a double ton.
That's a 150 locked in from you, Marcus.
Nice.
I mean, he's the obvious one. I think I'll look at Nick Dacos on a Friday night if it's not too wet. It'll be 95,000 at the MCG or 90,000 on a Friday night, and it's the big stage. And what does Nick Dacos love?
Absolutely.
The big stage.
The stage is pretty big. Nice one. All right, let's get Al back in here for some stats with Al.
All right, I'll get out of here.
All right, we've disposed of Patch, and we've got Al back. This is good because the segment is called Stats with Al and not Stats with Patch. So, Al, give us some stats in Stats with Al.
Thank you, James. And yes, glad to be back. Just flagging that we have the final round of DPP updates after this coming round. So we'll get a few more players with dual position. It's not going to be a huge list, but there's a few interesting names on there. So keep an eye out across Code Sports and the other platforms. During the week, we'll have the latest numbers on who's likely to get DPP. And someone like Isaac Rankin, very close, so it could really depend on how he goes this weekend, how much midfield time he gets, whether he could end up being a mid-forward, which could be handy. I suppose most people would pick him in the forward line anyway, but any extra little bit of flexibility could be a bonus on the run home. And another Crows player that I was looking at, he's not going to get DPP this time, but I thought I'd look at Rory Laird's time in position because his scoring's been a bit better lately. I know the great Skodfather brought him in as a pod on the weekend and he scored well, and so when he does that, he's normally a week or two ahead of everybody else, so you need to look at what he's doing. And I thought part of that was that Laird had gone back to half-back and he was in that role that we know he was an absolute SuperCoach god in for a couple of years before moving into the midfield. But if you look at his stats, in round 13, he played 97% midfield. Round 14, it was only 37%, and he spent most of the time in defence, and that's when he put up that big 141. But then this week, he was back to 100% mid, 0% in defence. So I don't know what Matthew Nicks is doing there. I mean, the Crows had a win, so I guess you'd give that a tick. But trying to predict what Laird is going to do week to week, pretty much impossible, I think. So, I mean, he could still score well. He's at an okay price for what we know he can do. But, not as confident as I thought I might be if that had been more of a much bigger split back in defence.
Nice one. I can't calm him down after hearing that. That's awesome. I love that he got on there early. All right. Should we do it? That was some good stats with Al. Let's do captain's call. Nat, do you want to, peek behind the curtain? What are your first vote? You don't have to give us, obviously, you're going to lock this away. This is definitely going to be your strategy for this week ahead. But what are your first thoughts on who you'd VC and see this week?
Yeah, it's a tough one this week. As Patch said, I think it's hard to look past Dacos at the moment. He's just in ripping form and his stage it really is set for him. Again, Bontempelli is someone who's on the radar. Certainly. A couple of ones that haven't been mentioned, though. I think Max Gawn against West Coast at the MCG looks really nice. I know last time he played the Eagles wasn't great. They sort of did this sort of really weird restrictive role on him, actually. They're trying to block his sort of movement around the ground. Sort of a weird strategy they employ. So I wonder if they go with that again. Brodie Grundy's one that's interesting against Marshall, who has leaked a lot of points. Gave up 150-ish to Jackson. Merritt is someone who could also be bounced back, I think.
No.
But yeah, BC only, I think. But yeah, I think for me, I'd probably be looking at like a Dacos into a Bont or something like that, or a Bont into a Gawn would be sort of my two at the moment I'm thinking about.
Nice one. I'm very easily just going the old tried and tested Dacos into Gawn with Gawn at the G as well against West Coast. I feel pretty okay about that, especially with some of their injury woes with the Eagles. The Eagles travelling as well. Not great. So Gawn at the G, I'm okay. Feeling good. What about you, Al?
I think probably Dacos on Friday night. And then my backup will be Luke Ryan on the Saturday night. I think they play over in Perth against the Tigers. So, a bit of a default. You always look at who's playing Richmond. They give up points. You mentioned that. I think Patch mentioned too is a real factor in captaincy choices for sure, and even with trades, you're looking at which teams give up points to certain positions.
Yep.
And Richmond gives up points to just about everybody, but certainly midfielders. We saw Cripps and Walsh go off yesterday, and those sort of defenders as well. I think Newman scored 150, Sard scored 100, and last time obviously Ryan played the Tigers 197 points at the G. So his scoring has been a little bit lower lately. Like you said, the tactics maybe have shifted a little bit from Freo, but would you be confident that he can pull out a big one against the Tigers?
I'd be fairly confident. Wouldn't feel great about having him as my C at the moment, just with that little form slump and potential gameplay change. Maybe I'd prefer a Sarong actually from that game if I'm looking at Richmond mids. We saw what Walsh and Cripps did, as you say. So Sarong is one who, yes, had a poor score, but was on track for a big one and actually just copped a bit of attention. I think the Jordan tag went to him in that second half, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, bodes well for Sarong at home. And maybe a Jordan Clark as well, someone you could look to as well for that Richmond factor. Yeah.
Nice one. Well, that leads very nicely into the game of names. It's a name game where we have a bunch of names. Apparently, I lost this week because Tom De Koning didn't play, so Al's just taking that one.
In the wise words of Homer Simpson, default, the two finest words in the English language. So I'll take that one.
So I think that makes it your third win for the year.
Whoa!
Which is okay. But we've got a couple of options for this week's head-to-head. Luke Ryan versus the Tigers. We want to go an over-under, or we can just go, you have a Luke Ryan in your team, I believe, Al?
Oh, I certainly do, yes.
I have a Max Gawn. He's playing should we just go head to head with a bit of a captaincy vibe? What do you think?
Yeah, and I think I'll back in Ryan. There was some word a couple of weeks ago that Longmuir was sort of saying, we don't want as much chippy stat padding, and since then it has been a noticeable drop in Ryan's scores. But just, the way Richmond concedes points to defenders, I can't see him scoring under 120 at least, at the minimum.
I like this. This is high scoring, high flying. Gawn versus Ryan. I like this a lot. Nice. I think the other option was looking at a Harry Mackay versus a Charlie Curnow, which would be an interesting one as well. And I don't know. They were still both in my no-go zone, so I'm just going to no-go near that one. Monday moves. It's getting a little bit tricky for your Monday trades if you've got a rage trade left in you or not. Mine was quite literally, we talked about Caldwell and it sort of blew my mind that Nat came in and he's on his team, because that was like the one thing where I'm like, can I sort of finagle bringing Caldwell in? I don't know if I can yet. So it's probably going to take me all week to figure out exactly how it can. But at the moment, the sort of step up is like Lockie Sullivan, right? And he's the most traded out player so far this week, along with Hugo Garcia on my team as well. And I've got maybe just enough cash in the bank to maybe make one or two trades where I'm like, ooh, could I, should I, will I? I don't know. Or I might just keep it for injury cover. So it gets a very, very, very sort of philosophical argument at this point. Like, what are you trading for? Do you need to still finish off your team? Are you just trying to upgrade, as we talked about earlier in the show? Are you trying to get rid of like one of those sort of weak links? I don't know. So what about you, Al? Are you going to make any trades this week with your six remaining?
Yeah, well, I know six feels like...
Al over here. Jeez.
I feel like I'm wasting opportunities by not using them. Everyone else has used them all by now. So it's a question of, do I use one or two? I think, presuming there's no injuries or anything crazy at selection, I think Rowell is gone. And it's just a question of, do I use one trade and go straight to a Connor Rozee type, or potentially use two, and I've got a bit of cash sitting in the bank already. I could get him up to a Rankin or a Sinclair or something. It's a bit of a weird year where the pure mids aren't really going that great. So I could, I would be happy bringing a Sinclair into my midfield, say, at this stage of the year. And he'd be a bit of a dual position link with Dacos in the back line as well, which could be handy. So he's absolutely flying, but obviously you're paying top dollar, which Nat has counselled us against doing. So maybe it's not the best time to get him, although obviously very low owned, so it could be a nice pod on the run home. Or then the other option is there a way I can, get a Rankin or someone cheaper like a Caldwell and maybe push Curnow to the bench and have an extra, cover that way. So there's a few different angles I could cut it. Tell me what to do now.
Yes. Well, I'll put a little disclaimer, I guess. But no, I think you can definitely look to move on some of those underperforming players, as we've said, just to try and get a bit of a leg up on the competition, or maybe claw back some points depending on where you are. I wouldn't feel great about trading out someone like a Curnow or someone who's a full forward. Is going to have those ups and downs. You don't want to trade him out now and then he goes bang in a few weeks and you sort of really get the wrong side of both of the coin there. I would say definitely look to pay up for guys now, though. I know I've been saying not to pay up for them midway through. I think now if you've got enough cash, it's your last upgrade, pay up now, because you're probably not going to be trading further down the line, so it shouldn't impact you down the line. As long as you've got a little bit of cash in the bank, that's probably sufficient. Getting the best player in possible, I would certainly be advocating for it at this stage of the year. So if that's Rankin for you, I'd say go for it.
Nice one. And with your two remaining trades, I'm assuming you're not going to make any trades this week now.
I do want to. Yes, I would like to. But no, definitely no trades for me. Just sit on my hands and let the team do its thing.
Nice. Just point. And off they go. Love
there's
that.
still, like, as you were saying, it's not like you just can't do anything all week. You can move loops around, and there's
exactly right.
There's
make sure
things.
emergencies on the correct players. Make sure you got loopholes set up if you can. So get the E on someone who's playing early, and then see his score. But again, minimal research and trade for me.
Nice one. What a spot to be in. Number one. This has been awesome. And that is it for the round 16 wrap, round 17 preview. This has been really, really fun having Nat on. Just to actually, have someone who actually knows what they're doing, Al. What's going on? I was like, come on, man. I'm in the 100. What are we doing?
Al's doing pretty well.
Anyway, so remember to subscribe to SuperCoach Plus, take your game to the next level, and follow all things Code Sports for the latest AFL SuperCoach news and analysis, some might call it. If you haven't already, please leave a rating review on Apple, Spotify, subscribe to Code Sports on YouTube as well. And you'll get notified whenever new episodes of this here show drop. For all the latest news and fun gear, setting up your week, finishing off your week, AFL Today Show. It's always a good one. So thanks to Patch for jumping on. Thanks to the Phantom. Thanks to Al. Thanks to Nat.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Well, yeah, hopefully you still will be obviously tracking your progress closely and maybe get you back on closer to the end when that 50K is really in sight.
Yes, hopefully all things go well, and that I'm here. I'd be more than happy to come back on whenever you guys will have me.
It'll cost you $500. Yeah.
I might have the money to
Just 10% done. Off we go. No, that's not 10%. What am I doing? That's why I'm really bad at this year's SuperCoach. Either way, this has been awesome. Have a good one. Happy SuperCoaching.